The Last of Us developer Naughty Dog reportedly cuts 25 positions. Unaffected staff allegedly told not to publicly discuss the layoffs. Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to the GNRO Minicast. I am your host, Adam Mickelson, aka Drak. I hope everybody's having an awesome day or night when you're watching this, and thank you so much for the support. We appreciate it. And we are taking on an interesting story about one of the developers I've been giving a lot of flack to over the last few years, and it looks like they are coming across some hard times. And of course, the article today that we're going off of comes from boundingintocomics.com, so make sure to go ahead and visit the article there, and I'll also put a link in the description below. And it is written, once again, by Spencer Picculi. For those who don't know, he wrote the Power Rangers story that I did last week. So, let's go ahead and get into it. According to a new report, The Last of Us development studio Naughty Dog has followed in the footsteps of its most recent protagonist. Oh, Spencer. Silly boy. There's no such thing as a protagonist in The Last of Us. And taken a golf club to its own employee base, both by abruptly axing 25 positions across the company and by allegedly pressuring those lucky enough to have survived the cuts to refrain from publicly discussing the situation. That's the interesting part layoffs happen. That's not necessarily the thing I find the most interesting. What I find the most interesting is the people who didn't get laid off aren't allowed to talk about it either. Usually there's some kind of NDAs or something like that where the laid off employee can't talk about it. But in this case, we have the people who stayed on. The people who are still hired have this NDA on them. So let's get further. This shakeup to one of PlayStation's most touted first-party developers was first revealed on October 3rd, courtesy of two alleged insiders, because insiders never happen, who spoke to Kotaku's Ethan Gach. These insiders asserted that following these layoffs being internally announced to Naughty Dog employees last week, the Uncharted series developer proceeded to downsize at least 25 of their over 400-member team. So that's quite a number for them, because they are a smaller studio than most. Though a majority of these cuts are said to have been made to the studio's quality assurance testing team. Of course, the majority went to quality assurance. It looks like Naughty Dog is going down the Todd Howard path of game development. Said sources noted that other departments ranging from art to production were also impacted. However, while these cuts were somewhat wide-ranging, Kotaku sources noted that none of the company's full-time staff were caught in the crossfire. Further, the insiders also claimed that not only was Naughty Dog waiting to officially end the relevant contracts until the end of October, thus requiring those affected to close out the month under the developer's employ, but they would be offering absolutely zero severance pay to those soon-to-be laid-off individuals. Let's take a look at where Naughty Dog is based, shall we? Oh, looky, they're based in Santa Monica, California. And I believe California has laws against that whole zero severance thing. I might be wrong about that, so I find that kind of funny. As to why it had taken nearly a week for knowledge of this shakeup to become public, the sources ultimately informed Gach that remaining employees are being pressured to keep the news quiet. Now, I can get why they would probably have done that. I've since spoken to a few people about this article, and frankly, there might be a good reason for it. Sony might not want the bad press. The stockholders want to be able to have faith in the products that Sony is giving them, and Sony is the parent company of Naughty Dog. So it is possible that that's why they're asking people to keep quiet about it. However, I do think some shareholders would more appreciate the honesty, especially since they're making it such a, quote, non-issue. If you'd just been upfront with it, I think your shareholders would have been okay with that too. I mean, you would have lost some, but I think you still would have overall kept the majority. Notably, Naughty Dog is far from the first or even one of the first developers this year to have undergone a massive staffing reduction. I can already think of 2 companies after buyouts. Since the start of the new year, 2023 has seen such developers as Epic Games, Electronic Arts, Riot Games, and even CD Projekt Red, as well as numerous video game news publications like GameSpot, Giant Bomb, and Waypoint, reckon with their rise in production costs by cutting a number of their own employees. And this is very true. Although I did find it funny you didn't keep Kotaku in those numbers as well as Polygon. What does this mean for the future of the video game industry? Truthfully, only time will tell. There are too many moving parts, behind-the-scenes actions, and socio-economic X factors to give a definitive answer. Yeah, they're really, I can't disagree with that. There are a number of factors as to why it is actually happening, and unless you were in the know, you probably wouldn't know what that is, because each studio is different. However, an educated guess would suggest that the staffing cuts are indicative of the fact that the Hollywood-esque ambitions of larger AAA studios have wreaked havoc on the medium. It's almost like somebody's been talking about that on a podcast somewhere. Gee, I wonder where that could have been at. From hastily thrown out releases full of nickel and dimed monetization mechanics to multi-million-dollar regurgitations of all of the MCU's worst writing quirks, thanks to, wow, I actually like that. Wow, nice, Spencer. Thanks to the corporate greed of such devs as Ubisoft or the aforementioned Electronic Arts, the last 2 console generations have given players more than enough condescending reasons to feel burnt out on the big releases. Yup, especially when they're bug-ridden pieces of shit. With fewer and fewer players allowing themselves to be suckered by a given video game's marketing hype, companies are finding it harder and harder to recoup their egregious production budgets, thus leading them to make such drastic measures in an attempt to stem the bleeding. It's almost like those budgets start needing to go down in order for companies to stay afloat. Because I don't know if you guys, I'm not an economics professor or anything, but if you're spending more than you're bringing in, it tends to be a bad thing for your bank account, I've heard. However, such measures sadly amount to nothing more than temporary financial stopgaps. Yup. Without a significant change to the industry's operating philosophies, particularly in the areas of monetization, socio-political messaging, and overall self-respect for their own work. The industry will continue to bleed and bleed until there's nothing left for it to do but keel over, just like it did in 1983. So, Spencer, wow, you went with both barrels today, and I actually appreciate that. My thoughts on this opinion, let's talk about this with Naughty Dog in particular. It doesn't surprise me that they're having positions being cut off, especially with rising costs, especially in the area that they live in, Santa Monica, California. So it doesn't surprise me that they have to cut these positions, and I will at least give them some credit. They are going to try and keep them on the payroll, at least it sounds like, until the end of October, which, since we're just barely starting October, that's a good thing. And that might be a way to make up for the zero severance, but the zero severance still kind of sucks. And so at that point, that's going to be bad PR if that actually tends to be the case. We won't know until, one of a anonymous source, which is going to be one of the laid off employees, is going to tell us like why these are happening and et cetera, et cetera. So at that point, it's acceptable to be able to hear stuff like this, especially with all of these studios having those issues. I just find it funny that we have somebody else finally saying what I've been screaming for the last few years, that game budgets are getting too out of control, enough to a point where they have to rely on things like microtransactions or any kind of monetizations in order to be able to make the money back. It's almost like if you are spending way more than you're getting in, you probably shouldn't be spending that much anymore. You ought to cut down the budgets. And so this is not surprising to me, and I do see it as a overall bigger problem that a lot of these companies need to address. Otherwise, they're going to end up basically like all the other companies before them and be bankrupt. Or bought by Microsoft. I mean, that could possibly happen too. And also, I do also agree with the how did he say it? The socioeconomic socio-political messaging, yeah, you kind of need to stop that because people are getting sick and tired of being preached to, no matter what part of the political spectrum they may be on. Sometimes they just want to go home and play a game or watch a football game and not have to worry about what's going on in the real world. It's called de-stressing or decompressing from the day. It's a helpful thing. Maybe some game journalists should look into that. Overall, my opinion on this article, first of all, it was well written by Spencer. I do agree that it is shit for Naughty Dog to do that. I think they're doing some things to make up for it, and I don't necessarily buy the whole we're trying to appease the stockholders, because I honestly think a lot of stockholders are sick and tired of the PR that a lot of these companies give them. And so the company that is more upfront with them, I think, would earn a lot of credit with them. And they would stay on because they were honest about it. So I don't know if I entirely buy that, but yeah, it doesn't surprise me that this is because of incoming gaming budget or rising game budgets and rising costs of everything else in between, especially now that we're having to get actors to do the motion cap as well, so you have to pay them more. It is sad. I have no problem saying that. I don't like hearing people losing jobs, but I mean, my advice to these people would be get out of the state of California. That's just my opinion. I know that's where all the big video game studios are, but there are a couple of AA studios out in the heartland of America that you could go work for, and you'd probably enjoy a lot more than working for AAA. And I also want to address a rumor. I wanted to at least get my opinion out before this. There has also been a rumor floating around that I've seen here and there, basically saying that one of the reasons Naughty Dog is having to do this is because now that Neil Druckmann is president, he's not really and now that HBO The Last of Us has happened, he's not entirely all that interested in the company anymore, and instead is probably looking for a way to either sell the company because of devaluing it or getting somebody else to take it over so that he can go and start off on his burgeoning Hollywood writing career. I don't know if like I said, this is a rumor. There is no evidence. I cannot back it up. I would like to say personality-wise, I think Neil would do that because he's already used a few people in Naughty Dog as stepping stones for his own career, Amy Hennig being one of them, and that still pisses me off. So personality-wise, yeah, it's possible, but more than likely, no, he's just bad at his job. I think that might be the case. It also might be because of the rising budgets. And also, he's doing bad at his job. But I guess only time will tell. And that's going to go ahead and do it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this. Thank you guys so much for your continued civility in the comments, because I actually do like having that discussion. Let me know in the comments what you think of this. What do you think the reason is that they're having the 25 layoffs? What they can maybe do in the future to be able to prevent those, how they could have handled that. I would love to be able to have that discussion with you guys, especially if you can do it in a civil manner, because it's awesome when you guys can do that. And if you like what you hear, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel. We definitely appreciate that. It goes a long way to be able to help us out as a smaller channel. And when we come back next week, I actually will be revisiting a story from a couple of weeks ago. We'll be going back to Castlevania, because it turns out that Castlevania Nocturne has stirred up a couple of socio-political buttons. Let's put it that way. Until then, thank you guys so much, and we will see you next time.